Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to speak to Bill 21, Environmental Management Amendment Act 2016. Now, Honourable Speaker, this bill is designed to provide the legal foundation for a spill preparedness and response regime in British Columbia. The legislation, as we just heard from the member from Saanich North and the Islands, puts in new requirements for spill preparedness, response and recovery, and it creates new offences and penalties. However, Honourable Speaker, the problem with this bill is not so much what's in it, but what's not in it. This bill puts much, if not most, of the items of interest into regulations. And I'd like to give just a couple of examples of this because I think it highlights what we're debating. We're debating an enabling legislation. It is clearly an enabling legislation, essentially enabling government to put in place regulations that will govern a spill response and regime. So before I can even get to a couple of examples of what is in regulations, I have to start with a definition, Honourable Speaker, and it's a definition of what's called a responsible person. In this legislation, this amendment, a responsible person means a person who has possession, charge, or control of a substance or thing when a spill of the substance or thing occurs or is at imminent risk of occurring. So that's what a responsible person is, rather broad. But now I would like to give some examples because I think it ultimately highlights how much we are essentially debating on here that has to be put in regulations. Section 9111 of the Environmental Management Act would be amended to include the following. Section 9111 would be added to the Environmental Management Act. And listen carefully. A regulated person must ensure that, on or before the prescribed date, the regulated person has a spill contingency plan that complies with the regulations. What does that say? As a prescribed date, we leave it to government to prescribe it, that the regulated person, whoever that might be, has a spill contingency plan that complies with regulations. Not very specific. The spill contingency plan is reviewed, updated, and tested in the prescribed manner at the prescribed frequency. Okay, that doesn't give us an awful lot of comfort as to what that means. The spill contingency plan is made available to employees of the regulated person in accordance with regulations. Essentially, it's saying, trust us. The spill contingency plan demonstrates that the regulated person has the capability to effectively respond to a spill and, if required by regulations, the spill contingency plan is published in accordance with the regulations. You can't make this stuff up, Honourable Speaker. If required by the regulations, the spill contingency plan is published in accordance with the regulations. Does this mean we wouldn't actually publish the spill contingency plan if it's not required? Does it mean that if we don't have the in accordance with relations at the end, we can just publish whatever contingency plan we want? I mean, it's bizarre. Let's further down, Honourable Speaker. A regulated person must ensure that, in accordance with the regulations, records respecting investigations, tests, and surveys referred to in subsection 2 are prepared and kept for the prescribed period. Again, what does that mean? Prescribed reports are prepared and submitted to the director. What prescribed reports? Employees of the regulated person receive prescribed training to prescribed standards. I'm honestly not making this up, Honourable Speaker. Employees of the regulated person receive prescribed training to prescribed standards. Trust us, says the government. Employees of the regulated person engage in spill response training, exercise, and drills in the prescribed manner and at the prescribed frequency. You know, we are being asked, Honourable Speaker, to certainly trust that government will have the best interests of British Columbians at heart as they develop, in their words, not in our words, but in their words, a world-leading spill preparedness. Now that brings me to another point, Honourable Speaker. You know, in the field of science, when we hear universities describe themselves as world-class, we know right away that they're not. Because the people who describe themselves as world-class clearly are not world-class. Because world-class scientists are described as others as world-class. World-class institutions are described by others as world-class. When this government stands up and says it's building a world-class spill response, I can assure you, Honourable Speaker, it will be anything but world-class, because we would be expecting others to look at it and tell us if it were indeed world-class. Given what we've seen around us under the professional reliance model that this government is so proud to put forward, we only have to look at Mount Polley. Was that a world-class response? I don't think so. What about what's going on in Shawnigan Lake? Is this a world-class process for a world-class land use agreement for a world-class containment facility? I don't think so. Is our LNG that we're going to world-class standards, cleanest rhetoric in the world? I don't think so. Honourable Speaker, this government's full of rhetoric. It's full of rhetoric that's substanceless, and frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of hearing them call themselves world-class. British Columbians are tired of hearing them calling world-class. They're not world-class. Honourable Speaker, they're parochial. Parochial and inward-looking and missing the bigger picture of what's going on in the world around us. Honourable Speaker, with that said, you know, I did participate as an intervener in the Trans Mountain hearings over the last couple of years. And let me tell you, that was a lot of work. Hundreds of hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours by the team, pouring through papers, many unresponded to questions. And what I learned from that, Honourable Speaker, is British Columbia, in fact Canada, has simply not the capacity to respond to any spill of any magnitude. And in particular when it comes to diluted bitumen. We have no idea at the basic level of science as to what would happen if diluted bitumen were to spill in, say, the Fraser River. We know there's a lot of suspended sediments there. We know a lot of it would sink, but we really don't have any idea. You know, frankly, it is reckless. It is reckless for this government to be talking about even entertaining the Trans Mountain proposal and putting in place these regulations now, while still allowing, Honourable Speaker, while still allowing one tanker a week laden with diluted bitumen to leave the Burnaby ports through our coastal waters, when we don't even have a response capability today. Where is this government actually standing up and being truthful to British Columbians that we need an immediate moratorium on the transportation of diluted bitumen in our coastal waters? Because, as admitted in this Environmental Management Amendment Act, we don't have any standards here in BC. If there were a spill, Honourable Speaker, my riding of Oak Bay Gordon Head, the riding of my friend here in Saanich North on the island, would be devastated. Yet we have no management plan in place. Government's trying to put a management plan in place, largely for land-based spills. But we have none now, and it is reckless and irresponsible for us to continue to put diluted bitumen in pipes and have that product shipped in our coastal waters. Honourable Speaker, a relatively new Trans Mountain pipeline proposal that was recently built in the US is already leaking. It's already leaking, Honourable Speaker. And right now there's cleanup and concerns happening there. Honourable Speaker, the basis of this bill obviously comes from the pressure of the major oil pipeline proposals. And I recognize it's coming in response to the government's willingness and desire, or condition number 3, to have in place what they call, through the usual hyperbolic rhetoric, world-leading spill response. So this is their attempt. But really, it's an attempt that we don't know anything about, because it just enables government, as is becoming more and more typical, in negotiation with industry, to put in place regulations as they see fit, and then surround it and wrap this in rhetoric about world leading and consultation and listening to First Nations, etc. You know, I get, and one of the things that I do appreciate in this, because it's a fundamental principle within the Green Party of British Columbia, is that it's based on a polluter pay model. The person who makes the mistake pays for the mistake, not the taxpayer. And so in that regard, I support this aspect. The other principles, not the only one of which is polluter pays that this is based on, are risk-based requirements, avoiding unnecessary duplication, a fair and transparent process, opportunities for First Nations and communities in preparedness, response, and recovery, and strong government oversight and continuous improvement. Now again, the strong government oversight is something that I would love to trust. I would love to trust that we would indeed have strong government oversight. But the evidence, Honourable Speaker, is that we cannot trust this government to provide that strong oversight. Again, I come back to Mount Polly. Again, I come back to Shawnigan Lake. And there are other examples out there. Let me give you probably, Honourable Speaker, what I perceive to be the most worrying aspect of this bill. It may not seem like much, but Honourable Speaker, it's on page 15 of the legislation. If we turn to page 15 and we look at D, where it says, by adding the following paragraph D. Now I'm going to read this slowly, Honourable Speaker, because I can't make this stuff up. Exempting a person, an organization, or a thing, or a class of persons, organizations, or things from any provisions of Division 2.1 or the regulations under this division in circumstances and on conditions that the Lieutenant Governor in Council prescribes. Essentially, Honourable Speaker, this says that anything we have in here, we can exempt if we want as Cabinet. You know, trust us? I don't think so, Honourable Speaker. That clause is deeply, deeply troubling. So, Honourable Speaker, while I will recognize that this bill is a step in the right direction, it's not clear to me that I can support it at this juncture. It's not clear to me that I can support it in light of the fact that I have no idea where the regulations are going. So I look forward to exploring that further at third reading, at committee stage, to see what the government has in mind so that we might, as a matter of record for future cases down the road, get a sense of what the government's intentions are with respect to each and every one of these sections, of which there are many, where everything is prescribed to regulations. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.